Hi, my name is Scott. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the second video in a series on the human ego, how it is the diametric opposite of true love, of enlightenment, of the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it. Ego is the diametric opposite of all good things. And we need to understand that, and I'm hoping that this series will be of some service in helping us to understand that. Now let me begin. What is the human ego anyway? Alright, the ego chases after four things. Basically four things. The ego chases after money, it chases after property, it chases after the all-important status, and it chases after empty gratification. Alright? Money, property, status, empty gratification. The ego spends almost all of its time dwelling on these things, chasing after these things. Now we've all known people who do that. They could be anywhere. On their wedding day they're thinking about money, they're thinking about property, they're thinking about status, they're thinking about empty gratification. 24/7. We may not see it in ourselves, but I would challenge you to look at yourself, because when I look at myself, I can see the distractions and how easy it is. You turn on the television set, you see a commercial for a car, you see this, you see that, you're thinking about paying your bills. Well, that's money. Okay, we all have to pay our bills, that's true. But in this series we're going to talk about what is the opposite of ego. Okay, I like to use the example of true love, only because it's something that most people can comprehend. The average person might not know what enlightenment is. The average person might be offended by the idea of the Holy Spirit if they're not into religion, and that's fine. This is not about religion. The difference between love and ego is something that every human being has had to deal with since the beginning of time. Since caveman days, this has been a fundamental issue that we have all had to struggle with. Now, I'll take a reference out of history. I will quote all sorts of different things, from Buddhism, from secular society, individuals that I've known. I keep an open mind. Open-mindedness is the opposite of ego. If you're dwelling out of the ego, you might not want to look at this, that, or anything else other than your category of what you think is good. I am open-minded. I know we can get little nuggets of wisdom from all over the place. And we have to keep that perspective. Or at least let's have it as a goal. Now, historically, King Solomon was seen as one of the wisest people who ever lived. People say the wisdom of Solomon. He was the wealthiest man in the world. He had hundreds of wives, hundreds of concubines. He was an interesting figure of history. Now here he was having all these things. But in his old age, in his writings, he said that for his whole life, he had chased after what he called vanity. Now we could say vanity is ego. Well, sure it is. Status, money, property, it's vanity. He referred to it as a chasing after the wind. In other words, it was sad. He was sad. He thought he had wasted his life. He had built all these things, done all of these things, and he concluded that it was vanity. He had essentially wasted his life, spent it chasing after the wind. Now, we know that if we spend our lives chasing money, chasing property, chasing status, chasing empty gratification, what do we really end up with? If we get a bunch of money, but we have alienated our friends, alienated our families, well, we might have a big empty house, we feel miserable, we've got nothing to live for. A lot of people have more money than we do, and we're jealous of the whole world. That's not success. Chasing after those things, you know, Donald Trump, as I mentioned in the last video, that last video was called Trump's Ego, The Meaning of Life. If you haven't seen that, you could check that out. He refers to the world as not being a global village, but being an arena. an arena for competition. If you imagine savage competition, you go out there, you slay the other guy, you make yourself into some kind of an emperor, and then you find yourself as captain of the bone pile. But what have you really got? You know, where do you go from there? You end up with the big empty house, your kids won't speak to you. What have you really got? Well, you've still got the ego. But the ego is not the answer. The ego is not your friend. And that's really what I want to get across in this video. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what the ego is about. But to really understand the ego, you've got to understand what is the opposite. Well, I mentioned true love. Okay, we have an idea of what true love is, but we might not get the context. Okay, so there's true love. We can also define the opposite as enlightenment. You know how Buddhists are seeking enlightenment. I think we're all seeking enlightenment, really. Enlightenment is when we overcome the weakness and infidelities of humanity and the corruption of the world, and we become something more, whether it's like Gandhi or Buddha or Jesus Christ or whomever it is. You get that enlightenment, and we see that as a goal. Most of us see it as an unattainable goal. I don't think it is an unattainable goal. I think it's our destiny. It's kind of the whole point of the human journey, is to get from here to there. And I will go into greater detail as to how we do that in the next video. But for now, I want to get across an idea of what is it that stands in the way. Yes, that's ego, but I want to be more specific. We need to understand the specifics of this, okay? There's a difference between a singularity and duality, all right? That might sound complicated, but it's not. The idea is all life is connected, okay? All life is connected. In a way, I'm you, you're me. If you believe in God, then we're absolutely connected to Him. We're connected to all life everywhere in the universe. That thought is the opposite of ego, okay? That thought is the opposite of ego. If we are connected to all life, that means there's no such thing as separation. When somebody dies, we don't lose them. In fact, we don't lose anything at all. Now, let me go into greater detail here. A very wise person came up with a perspective. Now, whether the perspective is true or not, a perspective can be very valuable. Whether you're an athlete doing visualization or any kind of self-motivation, a perspective is something you need. Imagine this. What if there's a heaven, you're there, but you are sound asleep? You have enlightenment already. In fact, you have complete, absolute understanding of all things, but for some reason, you fell asleep and you are having a terrible nightmare. In this nightmare, you invented this world called planet Earth, and everything in that world, everything in that universe that you've created as you're having that dream is part of you. It's not somebody else. Everything in that dream belongs to you. You're connected to every part of it. It's your dream, okay? This perspective is very important for several reasons. One, because if you're competing with characters in your dream, you're actually competing with yourself. If in your dream you feel that if you steal something from somebody else you're gaining, well, you'd be completely wrong. It's like stealing something from your right pocket and putting it in your left pocket and thinking, hey, I just gained something. Well, you haven't, because everything belongs to you already. If this perspective is true, if all life is connected, you already own everything in this world. You own every bank, you own every house, you're married to every person. All the animals are part of you. All life is connected. All love is yours already. It's streaming through your heart already. All you lack is the comprehension to accept all of that, the willingness to accept all of that, and the ability to perceive it, comprehend it, accept it, have enlightenment, and move forward with enlightenment. Give up hating. Don't be jealous of the characters in your dream. That would be irrational. So this perspective is hugely important. Even if the perspective is a farce, if you can comprehend that perspective, if you can imagine yourself for a minute. If you were, let's say you were Jesus Christ and you're up in heaven and you're sound asleep. Maybe you did something wrong. Oh, that's blasphemy. Jesus never did anything wrong. Well, let's just say he did. What if he was up there in heaven, shot a bottle of Jack Daniels, passed out, now he's having a terrible nightmare, feeling guilty as he can be. I feel so guilty. And now he's having a nightmare. Well, as brilliant as he is, he could concoct an entire world out of his psyche. A world where people hate each other, there's wars, there's competition, everybody's jealous of everybody else. The ego is in control, people are jealous of their own children. People are sabotaging the relationships of their children, stealing their children's money, cheating their friends, robbing their neighbor, committing crimes, thinking that they're going to get ahead. Well, get ahead how? We've already talked about how if you become the captain of the bone pile, if you think like Donald Trump, life is an arena. The more savage a competitor you are, the higher you'll get. You'll be the captain of the bone pile. Well, what are you really? If life is a journey where you're climbing a ladder toward enlightenment, if you're thinking of life as an arena, you're actually going down the ladder. If we think in terms of enlightenment, Donald Trump has spent his entire life going in the wrong direction. If we look at value in terms of love, if we look at value in terms of comprehension, the willingness to receive all good things in unity with all good things, all things being connected, all love is the energy that connects all things. Okay, he is going in the opposite direction. Of all the people in the world, it's like his goal is to be last. If there's such a thing as reincarnation, he is going to end this life having placed himself last in line to continue the evolutionary process. If his goal is to be last, he may have achieved it. Now, you might think, well, what are you doing? You're beating up Donald Trump. We like Donald Trump. I'm only using him as an example because we know who he is. Everybody has qualities, and I'm sure he does as well. But we know who he is, and that makes him valuable as a case study. Now, I'll go back in history again. Cain and Abel. Most people are familiar with that story. Two people from early history. Whether you believe the story or not isn't the point. Okay, Cain is jealous of his brother Abel. He murders him. God comes and asks Cain, God already knew, but he asked Cain, where's your brother? Where's your brother? Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? Well, if all life is connected, then yeah, he is his brother's keeper. If your right hand can't take care of your left hand, who's going to take care of your left hand? Okay, we are our brother's keeper. All life is connected. He said, am I my brother's keeper? He was thinking in terms of the ego. The ego is everywhere, from the beginning of time until the end. Cain believed that he was separate from his brother Abel. He didn't believe in unity, he believed in separation. The ego is about separation. Enlightenment is about unity, singularity. Love connects all things. Cain rejected that. He believed his brother Abel was separate. Am I my brother's keeper? Well, that was the wrong thing to say. Cain got kicked out of the garden, as the story says. And the same is true today. It never changes. Generation to generation, it makes no difference. Now, you might not like the fact that I'm, took two spiritual references. I'm going to use many secular references, believe me, I will. But if you are a person with a spiritual perspective, consider this. I've known a lot of people in organized religion, and they tend to see things in terms of salvation issues. All right, let's look at it from their perspective for a second here. All right, Believers who think in terms of salvation issues should consider this to be the basis of the human journey. That's how important it is, all right? If you are asleep in heaven, you're having a nightmare. Consider this. How do you wake up from the nightmare? Do you simply comprehend that all life is connected? Well, that's part of it, but no. There's actually a critical component, and we will talk more about that in the next video. The critical component is actually forgiveness. Let me explain that. When you comprehend that everything your psyche has created in the dream, now this is a perspective that I'm sharing with you. I didn't invent it. If you consider that everything in the dream is from your psyche, how much easier is it to forgive the other characters in your dream? Now, do you ever wake up from a nightmare, a regular kind, and then have bitterness against the character that you invented in your dream? Well, no. Do you ever have trouble forgiving yourself for having a dream or forgiving somebody in the dream? Well, no. So, if you can comprehend that this concoction of your psyche, the human psyche, this concoction is not actually real, it's a dream, it makes it infinitely easier to forgive. Every time you forgive another person who's harmed you, you're forgiving yourself. That's who you forgive, not somebody else. Every time you forgive another person in this world, you are forgiving yourself, because that person is you. There's something about you that isn't quite right or that you don't like about yourself. This out of your psyche concocts this scenario. You might keep meeting the same type of person doing the same type of rotten thing to you over and over again all your days. And then for some reason you're able to forgive that person, let it go. Suddenly these people aren't coming into your life anymore. It's resolved. So we get out of the dream through forgiveness. All right? If you can comprehend this world as a dream, in doing so, in adopting that perspective, you are adopting a perspective that will allow you to forgive completely. It will allow you to embrace love completely. It will allow you to move forward in a state of enlightenment and do so completely. All right? We will discuss that more in the coming videos. So I want to thank you very much for this video. I encourage you to press like and do all that, and thank you for your attendance.